Coming up on another exciting installment of That Was a Show? Gloria was a show. This 1983 sitcom was a spin-off of a spin-off from the iconic All in the Family universe, but without Norman Lear and Carroll O'Connor. It does have lots of cute animals and the delightful Sally Struthers. Brynn, Aaron, and Barry enter this doomed story world by watching not one, but two pilots to decide whether it should be a part of the Archie Bunker canon. We grew up during peak sitcom, Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince, but those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Byrne,
Aaron Yeger,
And Andrew Helmer as Barry.
a Radio Gizmo production.
Welcome back, everybody, to That Was a Show. How's everyone doing today?
Super.
I'm doing just great. Thanks so much. Welcome back, everybody, to everybody's favorite bi-weekly podcast that shows up once a month.
Yeah, again, not to keep beating, a dead horse, but
We're trying.
yeah,
we're trying,
we're
guys.
trying. It's just that summer 2022 has been a challenging summer for us to be on a proper schedule, but we will get there. And we thank everybody who's, kept up with us and has been patient for new episodes.
That we do.
Yeah.
That we do. And
Yeah.
that was a show.
Yeah.
And of course, last time we talked about Hudson Street, and in that conversation, very organically, the name Archie Bunker came up, and thus leading us to what are we talking about today, Brynn?
Yeah. So not even necessarily because of Hudson Street, but I remember.
Oh no, don't ruin the magic. This is all thematically plotted out.
It's a happy
Okay,
accident,
it's
like a Bob Ross tree.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. So today we'll be talking about Gloria. So Gloria is the spinoff of Archie Bunker's Place, which is a spinoff of All in the Family, one of the many series that are in the history of the All in the Family universe. So it aired on CBS, and it had one season that lasted from September 1982 to April 1983. So Gloria, of course, starred Sally Struthers as Gloria Bunker Stivic. It also starred Christian Jacobs as her son Joey, Lou Richards as Clark V. Yulee Jr., Joe DeWinter as Dr. Maggie Lawrence, and legendary actor and I guess BFF of Carroll O'Connor, Burgess Meredith, as Dr. Willard Adams. So the show follows newly divorced Gloria as she moves to upstate New York to accept a job as a veterinary assistant. Despite having high ratings ranking at the time and being one of the more successful All in the Family spin-offs, CBS decided not to renew it after the first season. So we watched 3 episodes to prepare for this recording. We watched the backdoor pilot that aired as a part of season 3 of Archie Bunker's Place. We also watched the official pilot of Gloria and the final episode of the series that aired, which is episode 21, called An Uncredited Woman.
So, Brynn, tell us about the plot of the official pilot of this show.
All right. So basically, we learn that Gloria and her husband, Michael Meathead Stivic, have divorced because he left her for one of his students, a girl named Muffy, to live on a commune. which is, such a trope for that era. Gloria and Joey have arrived at a house owned by her new boss, veterinarian Dr. Adams. Dr. Adams shows her around the house, and the twist is that it's not just a house that he's owns, it's actually his house that he lives in, and Gloria and Joey are gonna have to live there with him. It's heavily implied that he basically wants her around to perform domestic duties, and basically the doctor himself and his practice is very much kind of struggling because he likes to barter services for goods. And he's a very eccentric guy. So basically we start and Gloria's situation is already seeming very tenuous. We also meet the rest of the vet staff at the clinic, which is attached to the house. Which includes bumbling wasp Clark, who's a fellow veterinary assistant, and Dr. Adams' business partner, Dr. Lawrence, who is a very long-suffering business partner because she hasn't had a salary in months because all Dr. Adams wants to do is barter for services once again for really strange and odd.
I mean, I'll say this. I don't think it's something that he loves doing. I think he has a big heart for the animals, and and people are poor.
Yeah, the implication is it's sort of a save the cat element of his character that he doesn't want to refuse service for anyone who needs their animal cared for. So he's willing to take just whatever people have lying around as payment, and he's terrible at business.
Yeah.
That's sort of the implication.
I don't know, guys. I mean, you guys are really giving him a lot of credit.
No, that is being very generous. He's not. I don't like him as a character.
I think that was all in the text. I think that was all in the show. That's
the purported reason. I still don't like him as a character for other reasons.
Yeah,
he's a fine sitcom character, not a person, but
yeah. So another twist, of course, in this unfolding situation is that neither Dr. Lawrence nor Clark even know that Gloria's supposed to be working there, and they're all like, "What the hell?" How can you hire someone else? And he basically is has this whole scheme of hiring her because he doesn't have to pay her as much because she's a woman and is not actually certified as a veterinary assistant. So his plan is to have her there to do all the kind of dirty work, and he will train her and help her get certified eventually, and then she will work for the clinic.
Yeah, it's kind of he sees himself as some sort of mentor type of person, I guess. He's giving her room and board. She's working cheap. He does though make a point of saying that this is a way to get away with having cheap labor. It's clearly
it's a complicated situation.
It is. The man definitely seems to think that he's running an eccentric family, but nobody involved in the operation agrees.
Yes.
Yeah, none of them are on board for this.
Yeah.
No.
It is a very weird and eccentric situation, orchestrated by an eccentric man. And, it is problematic, but at the same time, he is helping her get a second chance. So it's a very strange thing to parse, it's a very strange thing to analyze.
Yeah,
it is. It is. Yeah.
I'll also say right now that it's impossible for me to watch this show and analyze it without comparing it to All in the Family.
Obviously.
And not just because it was a spin-off, but I was a big fan of All in the Family when I was a kid. Growing up, I watched that show a lot when it was playing on syndication and really liked that show. And there's elements of this show that feel apart from obviously the Gloria character is pulled from All in the Family, but there's other elements where it feels like they're trying to achieve some of the things that show achieved, and I don't think they are. And so it's hard for me to see this show outside of the framework of the way that it fails to live up to that legacy and is kind of a good demonstration of why All in the Family worked by looking at the things in this show that don't work. But anyway, we'll We'll get into it.
We'll eventually get through this episode description.
Well, I mean, that was it. I mean, ultimately, she
Yeah.
the whole thing is that it's kind of like a fresh start for Gloria, and she thinks it's going to be one thing, but then it turns out to be more complicated. She realizes, of course, that she's now going to have to devote 2 years of her life to, getting an actual certification for the job. And she kind of is like at this point where she's questioning her decision, and her dad is referenced throughout it, like basically as a, background thing of her dad not believing in her, and that she's going to call him and tell him that he's right, but then thinks otherwise and is like, no, I can do this.
The implication is that if she doesn't make this work, that she'll go crawling back to living with him.
Yeah.
So this is a good time to kind of bring in, I'm glad you brought up, Aaron, that you were a big fan of All in the Family growing up. Where does everybody stand on All in the Family? I mean, we got Aaron's. Brynn, what's your experience with All in the Family?
Honestly, not much. Like, I remember seeing the opening theme song like hundreds of times as a kid.
Sure.
Like it would pop up.
And for you, you kids out there, classically now is basically just the opening to Family Guy.
Yeah. It's like, that theme song is iconic. And I remember it would come up like, because it would play in syndicated reruns. But it wasn't the type of, show that grabbed me as a kid. I would always like change the channel. And then as an adult, I haven't attempted the rewatch because I just, I understand its cultural impact and why it was so important and all of that. But I just haven't given it the chance. Because I'm kind of afraid of the nuance, like I'm kind of like afraid of like seeing it and being like,
it's a hard watch. It's a hard modern watch.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to watch something like that in 2022 because it's like, or even because it's like the whole point is that Archie Bunker is everyone's, to use the current expression, he's a problematic fave. Like he is like terrible, but we all, the audience all still is on board with him emotionally, right?
Yeah, he's everybody's racist uncle. You don't want to dismiss him outright, but yeah. So that's interesting. So Aaron, big fan. Brynn, not a lot of experience. Me, somewhere in between, I would say, in that like I've seen enough of it to understand. I got all the references in this. I'd seen enough of it. So that brings me to an interesting question is I guess it would be for Aaron.
Yeah.
So Sally Struthers, she was married to Mike, who was played famously by Rob Reiner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Was he a piece of shit on the show?
No.
Or are they mad? Or are they mad at Rob Reiner for some reason? Because the show goes out of their way. But just
Gloria
context
goes
before,
out of its way.
Just to get in, just to contextualize this for our audience, the show repeatedly shits on Mike as a character and basically makes him into maybe the worst human being you've ever heard of. Which is like, I thought it was a really interesting
choice,
especially being that All in the Family had a very loyal following, and honestly, you would have thought most of them were on Mike's side. So it's kind of weird to kind of come into this where immediately the show is like, yo, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
And repeatedly.
It is a weird choice. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm really glad you asked that because some of my notes here are actually devoted to addressing that exact question. Which
I'm looking at his notepad. He's got like lots of
and what it really
different sections and underlined things.
I couldn't help myself because once I started analyzing this, I was like really thinking about why some of these characters work and some of them don't, and like yes, so. To get to the heart of your question, in All in the Family, Mike Stivic is a university student who's working on, I don't know, he's a grad student of some sort. The implication is he's been in university for years. He and Gloria are already married. They're living with her parents to save money because they're full-time students. And that's part of the intergenerational dynamic presented in All in the Family, because Archie and Edith, his wife, are of the quote unquote greatest generation. They are of our grandparents' generation. So it's important contextually to understand that Archie Bunker is not like a baby boomer.
Yeah.
Gloria and Meathead are the baby boomers.
boomers.
Archie Bunker, as he would put it, fought in WW2, the big one. And he's a like minimally educated war veteran who works down at like the docks, like a shipyard worker, basically. And so in his generation, like there were certain social expectations that he grew up with and that he has sort of internalized. And so one of the dynamics in the show is that his daughter and son-in-law are living with him and they are academics. And so that dynamic of the fact that like they don't have jobs and they're in school and they're doing all of this educational
And
stuff,
they're like liberal people.
Yeah, they're liberal people, but the battles that go on conversationally between Archie and them are not just the fact that he's conservative and they're liberal. It's the fact that he's like a working man, quote unquote, and they are these university students who he sees as these like ivory tower people who have no real life experience. Yeah. And so there's a logic in that show as to why the way I put it is basically like Archie will say something really stupid and ignorant and offensive, and his daughter or his son-in-law will correct him on it, and he won't really be inclined to learn from what they have to say because he doesn't like the messenger. He doesn't like that these kids who in his mind are kind of leeching off of him are the ones correcting him in his own home. When he gets corrected by other people, he is sometimes a lot more receptive. So Archie he says all these racist things, and if his son-in-law corrects him on it, he just sort of makes a farting noise. But he has this kind of friendship with the neighbors, the Jefferson's son, and when that guy, who actually is black, corrects him on something, then he is receptive to it, and he does care, and he genuinely cares about this young man. And so that juxtaposition between him and his son-in-law is one of the places where you see this. But
so he basically never likes his son-in-law.
Yeah. It's clear, though, that Mike, the things that he says are kind of the intellectual core values of the show. Like, as, you know, this person who is studying subjects in university that lead him to, you know, care about social justice issues. And you know, Gloria and Mike are both like this incoming generation of much more aware people who are on board for all of the social change that's happening in America. And Archie is not, and Edith is kind of oblivious to these things.
Yeah. And so, you know, so the whole show is, you know, that classic, you're writing a debate that might very well be taking place in a lot of people's living rooms at the time. Yeah. And you're writing it from a left point of view.
Exactly.
And then my recollections of Mike as a character would be like, you know, he had a tendency to occasionally be a little more pompous.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a way that a lot of liberal writers would basically like they would write themselves into the joke about, you know, like how up our own asses we can be and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like, so, yeah.
But there's probably this like level of contradiction, and then he probably developed an ego as he continued his academic career, and then did the whole tropey thing of sleeping with his students or whatever.
Yeah. So I think
still weird.
It is still weird. I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's a poor choice. Like, I think it should have been, if their marriage ended, I think it should have probably been more of a mutual thing. Like, they just grew apart. It didn't have to be this thing where he fucked her over.
Yeah. It feels like they're pissed off at Rob Reiner.
Yeah.
It does feel that way.
Yeah.
I agree.
It was a poor choice. And to really, after this long-winded explanation, answer your question, no, he was never a piece of shit in the original show. He could be a bit of a pompous ass in an intellectual way, but like was there any writing on the wall that he would cheat on Gloria, that he would have an affair with a student, that any of those things would
they
happen?
always seemed like a very loving
They
couple.
were a very loving couple. He could be a little bit misogynist. That was something that came out in All in the Family.
Yeah.
He would kind of act a little bit dominant over her in certain situations, and All in the Family did a relatively good job of making it clear that he was being an ass when he was being an ass. But like, no, it
is a leap, though,
it was
right?
a leap, and
Okay.
it wasn't a good choice. And to me, one of the reasons it wasn't a good choice was because, yeah, if you were a fan of All in the Family, you did care about him as a character. So this is not going to get you on board for this show. But also, the thing about All in the Family was because it was so much about that sparring between Archie, the anti-hero protagonist who, you know, this is why we talked about it on Hudson Street. He's the version of this that worked, which is that we are absolutely disagreeing with him in the content of what he says and intellectually, but emotionally we care about him as a human being. And he was a very effective character in that dynamic. But that works in part because of the juxtaposition with his son-in-law, which is the opposite. The son-in-law who we agree with in principle intellectually, but we understand why you'd be kind of pissed off about him because he can act like a dick. Like, we're not necessarily on board with him 100% of the time emotionally. We understand why Archie finds him annoying, but we agree with him intellectually. By making him a piece of shit like this, it kind of bursts the bubble of that dynamic that worked, and it ruins the legacy of that show.
Yeah.
So spoiler alert to everybody out there listening. I mean, this should really just be a good sign of how, like, Gloria as a show doesn't work, because it just begs you to talk about other shows.
It does.
Like, you're not like I have so little to say about the things that happen in the shows, in the episodes we watched, and more about the things that are happening off camera.
Yeah, that are like the larger context of the larger universe of the All in the Family universe. But I will say there is some very valuable messages that happen.
There are.
Especially in the second episode.
Exactly.
Yes.
The second, the final episode. Yes.
Yeah. Great
Like-
segue. Still just as relevant today, like a little less relevant, because thankfully things have changed a little. But
Yeah. I mean, and it was very like, I don't know, like I didn't choose this show for this reason, but given what's going on in the world right now,
perfect.
it was like very, I was like, is this going to be too triggering for people? Like, it's not about bodily autonomy, but it's about like rights of, you know, women just being, you know, shit all over.
Yeah, there's an agency and autonomy.
There is an agency and an autonomy theme, but it's not bodily autonomy. It's not as grave as what's going on right now for people with uteruses, but it is still, you know, hard to like, you know, watch.
And the episode also will tie in a lot into what's going on in the economy right now, which is very, very interesting. So
true. That too. Yeah. So basically in that final episode, it was the final episode that aired of Gloria. The plot is that Gloria wants to buy a car, you know, like, God forbid she wants something as simple as a mode of transportation. So she wants a car and she has her eye on this Buick, and the episode starts with her going to this dealership, this like used car dealership. It was called like, what was it, Smile and Dan's?
Something like that.
Smile and dance,
Yeah,
which we got some good jokes on the Smile and dance.
So she basically finds this deal on this old Buick for $500, and she puts a little bit of money down, and she's like, okay, I'm good for the rest. And then she has to she spends the rest of the episode figuring out how to come up with the rest of the money. So naturally,
she's specifically trying to get a loan, a car loan.
A car loan, a simple thing that we all, you know, like most of us need to do at some point in our life. So she goes out and searches for this loan. She goes to, actually, what happens is this scary guy in coveralls who's, you know, like has the wrong name on his name badge, comes to the clinic and tells her, hey, lady, there's something wrong with your credit. And like, so they can't sell her the card. So she's like, what the hell? Like I guess they had spoken to her bank and there's a problem. So she shows up at the bank, and the biggest douche ever of a loan officer basically tells her that because she is a divorced woman, her credit that she's built over her adult life is moot, basically. Like, it is not relevant, and she has no credit, so they can't help her out with a loan. Even though she has a job, and there's no evidence that she would be unreliable whatsoever, but just because she's a helpless little woman, she is naturally unreliable, and he's just very condescending and horrible to her in that entire scene. But it is funny in the sense that Gloria has like lots of like, you know, good comebacks and all of that. So there is a second attempt to go to the bank. This time Gloria goes with Dr. Lawrence, Maggie Lawrence, and which I really liked. Like, she goes there with her and starts defending Gloria to this douchey loan officer. And she's like, she is anything but, you know, indigent, as he says. And, you know, Gloria kind of tells her to sort of, you know, oh, just like wait for me. But I really liked that she went with her.
You can see there's been character development over the course of a season.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there is a relationship established with all of these characters.
Yeah, I really liked how it was like two women, one who is, you know, like a professional and one who is like a working class person, like supporting each other in this like very real situation that they both find themselves in. And, you know, at one point, Gloria asks Dr. Lawrence to co-sign for her, and she agrees. But then, like, the loan officer is like, no, you have terrible credit yourself, and you don't have enough money, even though she's a doctor. Okay. And you know, this is partly because of the whole wacky scenario of the clinic that she works for, the wacky circumstances of Dr. Adams running things the way that he does. You know, it becomes clear that the loan officer doesn't care that Dr. Lawrence is a doctor. He's not gonna like allow her to co-sign either. And then Dr. Adams tries to step up and help as well, but because of his weird, eccentric, specific circumstances, he's also turned down. But it's only when they start trying to pool their money together that something develops. And by the end of the episode, they are able to convince the bank to give her a loan. It's very touching because they go and buy her this
Pinto.
And but then Gloria also at the same time has, you know, been able to pawn her engagement ring and buy the car that she had her eye on. So it's nice because
They all come together. They all come together.
Like, it's really sweet because, and then Clark, because he's like a wasp, has all this like family money.
So he just buys a car that he says she can use.
And there's a joke somewhere in the episode about how, I've never had any trouble getting money.
They just throw money at me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's as close to, like it's some great commentary on the whole situation.
So there's some good commentary there. And what I liked is that, yes, they all came together to help her, but at the end of the day, she had enough agency to be able to go and do it for herself.
Yeah. So you mentioned that they got her a loan. They didn't. She gets herself the loan. They bought her a car.
They bought her. They didn't get a loan. So they bought her a car. They scraped together whatever money they had to buy her this junky car, this junky Pinto.
Yeah.
But then she ended up making it work for herself. So that's like a detail that I really appreciated. There was like lots of good commentary there, and it wasn't like other people had to save her. They tried to because they just cared about her as a person and thought it was unjust that this bank wouldn't help her. But at the end of the day, she did do it for herself. So anyway, I mean, I liked the way the episode ended.
It's a solid episode with a good payoff. And honestly, like, it's also admirable to me that they kept focus in that episode. There wasn't like several other like B plots.
Yeah.
It didn't like insert other stuff just to add more laughs. Like, it was really like just laser focused on this one plot line.
Yeah.
Every character was involved in something to do with that one plot line, and it was very pointed commentary, which I'm assuming in 1983, the year I was born, was relatively rare on TV to have this kind of direct commentary about an issue like this.
Unless it was All in the Family.
Unless it was All in the Family.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I mean, like reading through some of the other episode quick descriptions, like there are other things that are quite interesting. Like there's an episode where Gloria is like fighting to save this like program, like one of the courses that trains people, and probably mostly women, to do the veterinary assistant work. And so it's kind of like, it seems like there's lots of labor issues brought up in the series and feminist issues. So I don't know, it sounds like it had a lot of valuable messaging, but because it wasn't quite, I don't know, like the writing wasn't quite as up to par with some of the other,
I have a theory.
Well, there are a few like theories that are out there in the world as to why it didn't go anywhere. But you go ahead, Barry. Go like.
I mean, why? So, I mean, the honest thing is, why didn't it last like All in the Family lasted? Probably a simple thing for a lot of TV. All in the Family, as smart as it was, also had a bit of a cake and eat it too thing, where I would imagine there was a not small chunk of the audience who liked to hear Archie's racist jokes, and that wasn't their core. That was never their intended audience, but I would imagine there was a fair bit of them who still liked hearing him say terrible things. Much like, when Colbert was in character on the Colbert Report, he managed to pick up a fair bit of right-wing fans not getting the joke. And this show doesn't really have that. The jokes are very clear. Like Burgess Meredith, who is, for all intents and purposes, the bunker stand-in here. He's not in any way the same character or anything like that, but he's the one who's in the wrong.
Yes.
He's in the wrong. And the
also
show...
Clark, he's like a chauvinist as well.
And the show doesn't
Clark is the worst,
The show is very clearly... There's no, Burgess Meredith's character has some redeeming qualities. Clark has none.
Yes.
And the show, right off the bat, Clark is a punchline no matter what. He is always, he's a mimbo.
Yeah. He is a mimbo, for sure.
And that's the whole joke. So it was interesting to see, this show, because I think the pilot misserves it, because, it doesn't quite work, but then we see this episode and you're like, I can see a version of this show that works. And it's you said it was 83 the show came out,
82
right?
to 83.
82 late 82, early 83.
Yeah,
kind of
so
thing,
you're watching this episode in 83. Barely 8.5 years, have passed since a woman could get a credit card without a man co-signing on it.
Yeah.
That was 1974. Same with, bank loans, anything like that. This is a really interesting thing because clearly, I mean, as somebody who actually works in finance, the industry doesn't catch up pretty, quickly, right?
Yeah.
So this is showing 9 years later, there's such a discrepancy in the way men and women are treated financially. And even very small point made in the episode, the elderly as well. In that he, at the end of the day, they're not giving him money either because of his age and because of, so it is really highlighting some very interesting things. And I loved seeing it on, in a TV show. And I remember just being like, okay, right on. And again, I work in in finance, outside of our podcast. And it, there are biases that exist in the financial industry. So to see some very thoughtful commentary on this going all the way back to 83, really cool stuff.
I mean, I was cringing every time that ongoing joke came up where she's on the phone with different banks and companies, and they're all like, yes, I am in my childbearing years. Come on.
Brutal, but probably not even in any way far from the truth.
Yeah,
at that age. Yeah,
Anyway, go ahead.
Not allowed to discriminate against that. There has to be, because some law barely passed in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's my theory as to why it didn't work. And part of this theory encompasses the fact that I actually did quite like that last episode. And I thought, like, that commentary worked. And it showed me that the Gloria character worked. I like her. And
she's great. I've always liked.
Yeah.
I feel like she's like that great character who she isn't taken seriously because she's kind of bubbly and blonde, but she is a very serious and thoughtful person. But people look at her and they, and this is me maybe projecting my own life experiences. But like, like people don't think someone like her has a thought, that it goes beyond the superficial,
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
She's underestimated consistently.
Underestimated.
At every turn by her father, by society, by everyone. And she proves them wrong time and time again because she's a firecracker and she's very bright and very capable of, doing the thing she needs to do.
Yeah, so I liked that episode, but that scene where the two veterinarians were meeting with the banker was a very weird scene, and it almost felt like this show was verging on a documentary about this issue at the time. Like, it was great commentary, and I liked the Gloria character, but the problem is that it wasn't very funny, and that's okay. Yeah. That's okay in and of itself, but like, why didn't this show work as a sitcom? I think it set up certain expectations as a sitcom that it didn't live up to, and I put a lot of the blame on the Dr. Adams character, who I found absolutely insufferable. And there's reasons, I think, why the Archie Bunker character works, and I agree, Barry, that he's kind of like the stand-in for that type of character. Archie Bunker was lightning in a bottle. And we've talked about this before, like, lots of shows have tried to replicate that kind of character. Just stop. Yeah. Stop. Don't. You're not going to. And I think part of it is like, Carroll O'Connor's acting was great. My feeling is, he was never self-conscious about it. When you see Carroll O'Connor as Archie Bunker, he doesn't like say the racist line and then wink to the camera. Like, see, that was kind of funny. Isn't it funny that we're laughing at this like politically incorrect joke? No. He just has no fucking clue what he's talking about. It reminds me of like, I have one particular scene that I remember, a silly scene that I remember from childhood, watching that show with a line about like the most trivial subject where Archie was explaining why he doesn't like to eat sandwiches. It's because he had this theory that if you ate a sandwich, that in one bite you were getting some like bread and some meat and some cheese and some vegetables and whatever all in one bite, and your stomach wouldn't know where to send the different categories of nutrients to different parts of your body. So he likes eating a meal where everything is like laid out on the plate so that he can eat one ingredient at a time, because then his body will know how to digest it properly. And it's very obvious in that scene, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, he just, picked up some crazy theory from some coworker or from one of his parents, and he just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Running with it.
It's just running with it. And just spoke about this with conviction. And it was very obvious, even as a kid watching that character, he was a clown. He was a buffoon. Like, he existed on TV because, like, he was a fool, and thus demonstrating that the attitudes he was projecting and the things he was saying were foolish. And that was clear. And this show, it just, when Dr. Adams acts the way he does toward women, it's just not clear enough that that's what's happening.
Disagree, but not quite for the same reason. It's not like Burgess Meredith is just a fucking A-class performer.
I'm not complaining about him as an actor.
And he is here too. And I think the difference in what makes the characters work is what's the character's name? Dr. Adams?
Dr. Adams, yeah.
Adams is willfully saying these things.
Yeah.
And that's in the character. Adams is a scammer. He's a scam artist.
He is a scammer.
He knows when he's saying something offensive, and he knows that he's pushing somebody's buttons. And it's harder to really get a read on how you're supposed to really...
Okay, I completely agree with you. You articulated that better than I was, but I completely agree with that. It's like when Archie says something hurtful, he doesn't know he's being hurtful.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand anything that
he's
he's saying. He's
oblivious,
completely
yeah.
oblivious.
Adams doesn't necessarily believe these things. And that's what makes it so weird, because like sometimes you can tell he's just saying something, especially when it comes to his partner. He's just trying to piss her off.
Yeah.
And he knows he's going to get a rise out of her.
Yeah.
Like when he
he's not
says,
a likable person.
It's upsetting. You feel
in
like
the
he's trying
pilot,
to pull something over everybody.
Yeah, in the pilot, when he says, like, oh, and she's a woman, we won't have to pay her much. He knows what he's doing. Like, he knows he's saying this to a woman. It's not an oblivious comment he's making. He's saying this to get a rise out of her. And that's what makes the character really hard to like. And he is like, especially when the show, in this episode specifically, when the show is sort of writing him likably, where you're like, you can tell that they want him to have a heart. Yeah. But it's really hard.
He doesn't.
He does. But it's really hard.
Maybe toward animals.
That's a part of his saving characteristic.
He's saving the cat, but he's not saving the humans.
But it's really hard to get behind him as a character because of that, even when they do write him as a heart, to have that heart, right? Like it's not even contradictory. It's probably way more realistic than somebody like Archie. Like, he is a probably slight, like, Archie is giving way too many passes, like on All in the Family. Like, he's still a monster of a human being. Like, just because he has, he loves his family and stuff like that, like, you just want to kick the living shit out of him. Like, he is just a mean person, but because it's a comedy, it's not quite that, right? Whereas this guy, you're like, that they want you to feel that way. And it's weird.
See, I don't entirely agree with what you said. I think I want to like smack Archie Bunker a lot of the time for things that he says, but it's not because he's a mean person. It's because he's closed-minded and he's not willing to listen and like have useful conversations with people.
I guess I mean more in 2022. Like, if Archie existed in 2022, no amount of like, he's got good intentions is going to save that character.
I agree on that point. It's literally one of my notes is All in the Family premiered in 1971. That character will not work today because there's a very specific generational dynamic going on. There are tangible reasons for Archie Bunker's ignorance that there is no equivalent excuse for after 1971. He's someone who left high school to go fight in a war and then went to work in a factory. And the only opinions that he learns about an understanding that he has of the world is from
through that lens.
And that's
without the internet or anything.
There's
you
no
know
internet.
What I mean?
His whole source of information is one TV network's nightly news. He has
weird.
Well,
I can't imagine anything in modern day that might line up with that.
He's the guy who his only sources of information are two coworkers, Fox News, and whatever his parents taught him.
Well, not Fox News, but
it
whatever
wasn't Fox,
equivalent.
But the same sort of situation.
It's not. That's honestly, that's not why it wouldn't work today. Because as you were describing that, all of it, we were laughing because obviously we're right. There are still these people who are closed-minded where they get their information and all that. The point is
they
that
can
now
easily get information from other sources.
It doesn't.
Now.
So could Archie. Archie could have easily gotten. The point is, it ain't funny anymore.
No,
we're done giving you. You don't get to learn from your ingrained mistakes like we get.
Yeah.
You don't get the benefit of the doubt that Archie got.
I may have a differing analysis of going into the weeds, but in the end, I agree with your point, which is his character doesn't work anymore, and even in 1983, it wasn't really working anymore. At least not in the manifestation of this Dr. Adams character. And then the other thing, I mean, this is a small detail, but Dr. Lawrence, the partner. Yeah. So the implication is she bought into his practice. She bought 50% of his practice. So now they are equal partners.
Correct.
So doesn't make sense. A, why she'd want to be partners with him. B,
Yeah.
if she owns 50% of the
Well-
practice, why she's at the mercy of his bizarre business practices.
Well, think about it though. Even though she was a doctor, she would have had problems as a woman. Like she would have had she would have had problems. Like if she really wanted to be a partner with someone, there might have been pushback from lots of different sources.
She bought into a business thinking that she was taking it over from him when he was retiring.
Right, that's true.
And
She thought he would be retiring soon, and he
didn't retire.
refuses
Yeah.
to retire, basically.
and their clientele are all. It's not that she doesn't have any control over the business. It's that she bought in his business, and the clientele are all his existing clients, and none of them will pay them. So essentially, like, she'd love to be making money hand over fist, but they're not making money, period. And he took her on as a partner, essentially, because he was going to go belly up because he hadn't taken any money. So he took her money, which was all the money she had. And technically,
I know
she has a bit,
I know they lay out the logic behind this in amongst the mountains of expository dialogue that they squeezed into that pilot, but still, it just feels like every time there's an interaction between them, they have to rehash these justifications for why she's stuck there because it just feels like such a forced sitcom dynamic. Like it just doesn't feel. It's like they have to keep explaining it. It's not just like entertaining. It's not funny. It's just
I think,
you just want to sigh every time.
She has more like I wish it was what Brynn was saying, and that I wish it were commentary, but you're right. I think it is just a weird thing of like trying to maintain a status quo because you're right. This character is way too smart for this shit. Yeah. And like she would have thrown like that scammer out on his ass the first chance she had.
Yeah, I think, it is like a little bit contrived. Like, I think they did want another woman in the mix. They wanted another strong voice, another voice of reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they did want that, I think. And that's, like, it feels wedged in because, it is, again, another case of sitcom logic. Like, that person would probably have left, like, years ago. Like, she would not have stuck around for these shenanigans.
I mean, it's, Gloria to All in the Family is, it's after MASH. Like, you really miss the Korean War.
Yeah.
Like, they're just...
that's a good comparison.
But I mean, I will say I do like the character. I just wish they could have gone a different direction with it. I did enjoy the fact in general that it was a vet's office. Like
lots of cute animals.
And like on a personal note, like among the three of us, we have like a lot of people in our lives that like work in that industry that like, are vets assistants or were vet assistants, and our good friend is a veterinarian. So it's like, I don't know, big shout out to all the people out there who are taking care of animals and,
a shout out to them basically saying like, you can't just walk into this. This is a hard fucking,
it
like
is.
there's a whole degree involved in this. Like, this isn't like what TV usually says. Like, this is a place for hard workers and for people who,
who care about animals above all,
educated people.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, like, I don't know. I really appreciate all the hard work that they do, and big virtual hug to all of my all of the animal healthcare workers out there.
So let's talk a bit about this first pilot, I guess we'll call it.
Right. So there was a first attempt to make this spinoff, and it was with Carroll O'Connor and most of the like producers involved in Archie Bunker's place. But for whatever reason, the network rejected it, which is completely ridiculous because, in my opinion, it is the superior pilot. But what eventually happened was they included it as part of that season of Archie Bunker's Place. So it's kind of this weird backdoor pilot.
Yeah, it's very much like The Farm in The Office.
Yeah,
it was thrown out, but still used as part of the episode order.
So for the audience to understand, the three of us just watched it together. we experienced this, and now let's talk a little bit about what happens and what we liked about it.
Yeah, so it's similar to the official pilot in that it is, Gloria restarting her life, starting over, and taking this job as a vet's assistant. In this version, Archie, her dad, drops her off at the home of Dr. Adams. And, the setup is very much the same, except there's one big rule that Gloria and Joey can't have a pet of their own. Joey's very disappointed. There's also another random doctor that's there. Doctor, what was his name? Doctor.
I don't even remember the name.
They just call him Ben, usually. Yeah, Doctor something, but his name was Ben.
Yeah.
Well, no, Ben is the groundskeeper.
Oh, then who the hell knows?
Anyway, so there's a young male doctor who I think is meant to be, is the character that Clark replaces in the official pilot.
He's there as he's not a mimbo because he's a qualified doctor, but there is, I guess, some implication that he's
a jerk.
Yeah, he's just a jerk. Yeah.
But he's like, I don't know how that relationship is going to evolve, but
yeah, and
he's a foil. He's a foil. He's not. Yeah, he's not really. Yeah, he's a foil.
And so Joe DeWinter is still in this version as well, but she's not playing the doctor and business partner. She's playing a fellow veterinary assistant and who does anesthetic, which it seems like a bit of a reach, but she is a coworker at the clinic, but not the doctor.
They present her as a part-time person who comes in on days when they need an anesthesiologist or some other kind of veterinary assistant. It's not entirely clear, and we don't have the qualifications to understand what her exact title would be in real life. But
this is a very different version of this story. It is way more emotional. It is way more grounded.
Higher highs and lower lows.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. It is grounded. It is like everything about the pilot that shows up after this was essentially this show thrown into a wacky blender.
It is. It's thrown into a wacky blender, and it's more cynical, I think. It's way more the official version is way more cynical, and there are all those mean jokes at Meathead's expense in that official pilot, but not in this one. If you noticed, you guys noticed.
Correct. Yeah. Very interesting. In this one, the only reference to now she's restarting her life. She's no longer with Michael Stivic, but there's a brief dialogue reference to he's living in California. She and their son are living in New York. They're no longer together. But there's no further explanation of why they are apart.
But there's this very touching scene between her and Joey where she's basically trying to convince Joey that they're going to be happy there. And the line is, we're going to be happy here even if it kills us. But it's a very touching moment. It is very much in line with the kind of Norman Lear universe and the actual emotional tone of it's all in the family. It's very much that it's more aligned with that world. And then later on there's there's this plot that comes up where there is this kind of very wealthy uptight woman who shows up with a box of puppies, of infant puppies. And so at first we're delighted until we find out that she wants them to be put down because they are the product of her prized show dog and a dog of a less
some mutt.
A desirable breeding. So basically these puppies are mutts, and she wants them put down because her dog can't nurse them while she preps for her upcoming dog show. And so, of course, Gloria is horrified because she doesn't want these puppies put down. So she, whisks them away. And her plan is very ill-conceived because, of course, she doesn't know what she's doing yet.
Yeah. Well, the implication is that Gloria takes this woman at face value that Dr. Adams is going to
put them down,
do it,
yeah.
that he would be on board to just kill this box of puppies.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So she takes these puppies, and the plan is, of course, that her and Joey are gonna like try to nurse these puppies, and then it comes out that like her plan is like unravels, and Dr. Adams kind of comes to the house and confronts her, and he's like, well, why didn't you call me? Blah blah blah. And she assumes that he's gonna put the puppies down, so she starts quitting her job, and he calls up this like rich lady and basically chews her out on the phone. Like, how dare you? I, like abandon these puppies. And it comes out that, of course, he's not going to kill the puppies, and he's going to, help take care of them.
Because in this version of the show, the Burgess Meredith's character is not an asshole.
Yeah,
he's a sweet, kind man who really cares about animals.
Passionately cares about animals.
Yeah.
And it shows right off the bat that this is not the show that came out. This is not what the show.
Yeah. It's and that scene, like the scene where he's confronting her and telling her about how he would never do that.
Mhm.
I got tears. Like I got very emotional because I was like,
it's wonderfully performed.
Because he brings up this idea. The more I take care of animals, the more I like dislike humans or something, or like it's something like that. And I'm like, this is a sentiment I've heard from people like vets and
It's
things.
interesting because this show opens on like when Archie drops her off at this house in the country where she's going to like be staying and working for this veterinarian. It's almost like a literal handoff from the old show world to the new show world.
Yep. Yeah.
Archie Bunker makes an appearance in the first scene. He's very much the Archie Bunker that we remember, with the kind of ignorant remarks that he makes, but also like very well acted, and it's a fun, kind of a funny scene. But you're right, like immediately the vet, Dr. Adams, is bouncing off of Archie as someone with different attitudes. So it's like it's handing off Gloria into this new show world, but it is not presenting Dr. Adams as someone who's going to be the replacement for Archie Bunker. It's a totally different kind of character.
In fact, he pointedly does not like Archie.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
He finds Archie very, crass, and the Adams character is a very classy man. Like, he's very, a little bit more of the, that classic Burgess Meredith, like the way he naturally speaks comes out here, and not
it's obvious that the intention is that he actually is going to be an earnest mentor to her.
And there's nothing like icky about him.
There's nothing like sketchy or icky or like it's so interesting how they took it in the new direction.
It's interesting, but also like I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. This is better written. The characters are much better. It's a sweeter thing. I was much happier watching this than I was at any point watching the other show.
Especially because the puppies lived, right?
It's not a sitcom.
Correct.
It's not
You're right,
funny,
Barry.
nor does it really try to be. So
this is why the network rejected it.
It's more like, we bought a sitcom. We bought we bought like a spinoff of All in the Family. So sure, we want some of that heart in there, but we want it to be funny. And this is like kind of like a half-hour drama set in a vet's office.
I agree.
And it doesn't work as a sitcom.
Yeah, it's not a sitcom. And the first opening scene with Archie Bunker is kind of funny, although it's not even shot like a sitcom. And
none of this is. It's
very cinematic.
Yeah, I mean, that scene has some laughs, but as soon as that character walks away, it feels like she has stepped out of that world, that sitcom world, and into her own story, which is good. But yes, it's a drama. It's different.
So obviously,
interesting experiment to watch for sure.
Yeah, it was cool, and obviously, this is why the network rejected it, and then as a result, Carroll O'Connor dipped out of it. So basically, like the real reason that a lot of people, and like this is something that is sort of touched on in this article I read from the Washington Post from May 1983 by Tom Shales. Like the the headline is Archie Bunker stifled. And most of the article talks about how Archie Bunker's place was canceled. So it's mostly about that, but then there is a reference to Gloria later in the article where it says, in addition, O'Connor became involved in a messy affair over Gloria. The CBS sitcom starring Sally Struthers that premiered last fall has now been canceled. O'Connor produced the pilot for the series with his partner and godson Joseph Gannon. CBS liked the idea of getting Gloria Stivic back, even as a single mother. I love how they say it like that.
Even.
Rob Reiner as her husband Mike, dubbed Meathead by Archie, would not return, but hated the pilot and exercised its option to bring in new producers. So they brought in new producers, and then O'Connor reportedly felt betrayed, not only by CBS, but by Struthers, who he felt should have fought more on his behalf. Yeah. So O'Connor recently told Entertainment Tonight that he would refuse to appear in Gloria in the Archie Bunker role. So basically, they probably thought, oh, this has nowhere to go because, we're at odds with Archie Bunker himself, Carroll O'Connor, and he didn't want any part in it. So, it could have been a good show. It could have had, but it's like these other producers messed with it too much.
It could have been a good show. Maybe it would have been more of a drama, but it might have succeeded. They pooped the bed on that one.
Yeah.
But this isn't could have been a show. That was a show.
That was a show.
It was a show.
It was a show, but it did not, have its full run.
Yeah. I did catch, not Rob Reiner, but I did catch an exec producer on Gloria, the final Gloria. There is a Reiner as a producer, so he tossed it to a cousin or somebody. This is to say, as much as a weird character as Rob Reiner is, just truly a great director. Like, just if you go through his filmography, it's the amount of shit he did in a 10-year period as a director. You're just like, what? You did this one too? Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, Brynn and I were talking about this before. It's like, he was Michael Stivic in All in the Family, but after that, he pretty much migrated over to directing.
No, I mean, and the sheer the breadth of his stuff. You got Stand By Me, you got Princess Bride, you got When Harry Met Sally, you got Spinal Tap. Come on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
epic.
Incredible versatility. Oh, and of course, he was instrumental in Seinfeld existing as a show because he ran Castle Rock and defended Larry David to NBC when they just didn't get it in the early days.
That's right. Now that's weird because I've always wondered where Castle Rock, the production company, came in as, Stephen King's famous fictional city is Castle Rock. And I always wondered what the two of them had together, but that makes sense. Rob Reiner
is obviously a fan.
Famously directed Stand By Me from a Stephen King thing. So yeah, clearly. All right, here we are. And Stand By Me takes place in Castle Rock.
So Brynn, why don't you go ahead and connect Gloria with Friends?
Yeah, it was very interesting doing this because I assumed there'd be several 1 degree connections. But there actually were what I could find, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there'll be people at home that are going to be yelling at me and saying I've, missed one. But what I found were 2 3-degree connections.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, we're far enough away from Friends. I can see that.
1982. I mean, it's so basically
we got a little distance here.
Right. So the first one is through Carroll O'Connor. So obviously, Gloria played Carroll O'Connor's daughter in All in the Family and Archie Bunker's Place, and in this other random pilot of Gloria itself. So maybe it's 2 degrees. I don't know, man. Because if you count it, he was in it anyway. But we're not going to count it because it's not the official pilot. So we're going to say it's a 3-degree thing because they were in the All in the Family and Archie Bunker's Place together. Okay. And then Carroll O'Connor was in Mad About You.
Oh, okay.
He had a recurring role on Mad About You. And Lisa Kudrow also did. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Lisa Kudrow also was in Mad About You, where she played. Do you guys know who she played in Mad About You?
Sorry, refresh our memories here.
So she happened
idea.
to play Ursula Buffet.
Right.
Yeah, but
what's the
connection? Oh,
of Phoebe Buffet, who famously
Buffet.
was in Friends. So I'm one of the main characters in Friends. So there you go.
Oh, wait, you know what I just realized?
Connections.
One day I'm going to have to create a segment where we cut together every single one of these. And I know what the segment's going to be called. Another Trip to the Buffet.
No, we're not doing that. Okay, and so the other connection, it's like a little looser. I've made these connections before, but whatever, we're still going to use it. So basically, this is through Rob Reiner, who of course was her husband, Meathead, in Archie Bunker's Place and in All in the Family. Rob Reiner played himself on Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which starred Matthew Perry. And Matthew Perry, of course, was Chandler Bing on Friends.
Okay.
So,
nice.
I mean, I don't know about these connections because Studio 60 was so long after the end of Friends, but we'll still count it anyway. But, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But I've used it before. I have used it before. I remember in the history of that was a show. I have used it.
Backwards and forwards in time is not an issue
all right.
on degrees.
And that's it. That's all we got.
Did you guys know that the 6 degrees term itself, even though we always go with 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon being the most common one, and obviously we all know that the 6 degrees of separation thing. Yeah. Did you know that the actual theory behind 6 degrees of separation is that nobody on Earth is more than 6 degrees separated from each other?
I feel like I did know that.
I did know that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
We're all connected, so you know we should all you know that's
act
another
like it.
Yeah, that's another like argument for collective action and people.
Yeah, I think it is sort of like a humanist term.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm also I'm 6 degrees from Gloria. So
yeah. Nice. The spinoff, of course, is our next segment that we'd like to do. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is everybody kept working after this. Like it was a very successful bunch of people. So we'll start with Christian Jacobs, who played her son, Joey. So he worked throughout the 80s and 90s as both a TV actor on camera and as a voice actor. But today, interestingly, he is most known as the lead singer of a comedic superhero-themed band called the Aquabats. They're like a ska band, and they've been performing together since 94, and it's him and another guy that are like the main two kind of leaders of the band, and there have been rotating other members, and Travis Barker was formerly a member at one point, so it's kind of interesting. And they've had, they've done like a couple short films and did a web series about them, so they're basically like this like kind of goofy, kind of like Tenacious D, where it's sort of like it's a rock band, but it's satirical. And they're mostly ska as a sound, but they've also done new wave and that kind of thing. Okay, and then obviously Burgess Meredith was already a legendary performer actor. So he appeared in several TV shows, as you can imagine, after this, and movies as well, including Rocky V as a flashback. So obviously he plays Mickey in the Rocky movies, but I think he died in Rocky 3. But anyway, he appears in Rocky 5, which comes out after this, as himself, but as a as in a flashback. He was also in the Heat of the Night television show. He was in Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men. Camp Nowhere, which I actually was talking to you about recently, Aaron, because he hasn't seen Camp Nowhere. Have you seen Camp Nowhere, Barry?
Of course.
Of course you have. It's fantastic, but I really want to rewatch that. He also worked throughout the 90s until his death in 97. We also have Jo DeWinter. She did a lot of guest appearances on TV throughout the 80s and 90s. including Frasier and the John Larroquette Show, which we were big fans of. She's also a successful stage actress for her whole career, which makes sense. She kind of has that vibe. There's kind of like a big gap in her career after the 90s. But interestingly, there's like one credit in 2016 when she was in her 90s. It's an indie film called Monday Nights at 7, and it would have been released after her death because sadly she passed in January of that year. We also have Lou Richards, who played Clark. So he's had a really long and prolific career. He's played lots of doctors, lots of cops, and a couple of priests.
Nice.
So he's kind of like a very prolific actor in lots of like procedural dramas. He recently was in a couple of episodes of Silicon Valley. And in 2016, he wrote and starred in a short and web series of the same name called Failing Upward, and it's about people who fail upward, which is really funny because his character Clark was clearly someone who failed upward.
Yeah.
So maybe he's always been fascinated with that type of like white male character.
Speaking of the Clark character, what should we call that trope? That like young, kind of wealthy, privileged Ivy League frat boy type. Maybe he's a mimbo, maybe he's just kind of dumb, but we're supposed to kind of forgive his extreme privilege because he's dumb or something like that.
I think that's just the mimbo character, because mimbos are you usually forgive them for what they are.
I guess. But like,
whereas usually, which is funny because the bimbos are often are demonized, but the mimbos are almost always
like you're supposed to forgive them for it.
You're almost always given the benefit of the doubt on a
right.
mimbo.
But like what?
Yeah.
But also, like, think of someone like an Andy Bernard in The Office. He's the non-mimbo version of this kind of character.
But I guess it's just failing upwards guy.
Yeah,
I
so,
guess.
like, do we call it that?
Yeah, I guess.
Failing upwards guy?
For our star, Sally Struthers, she obviously kept working after. Like, she's had a really long career. She was in the 9 to 5 series based on the movie. She's done tons of voice work that we would have remembered. Like she was in Tailspin, if you guys remember Tailspin.
Fuck yeah, I do.
Yeah. She also was the voice of Charlene Sinclair on Dinosaurs.
Oh.
The teenage daughter.
That I did know. That I knew.
Yeah. So she's done tons of credits. She's in memorable guest roles. She was in Gilmore Girls. She played Babette Dell for the entire run of the series, pretty much for 52 episodes of Gilmore Girls. And that's
Good
a very
Lord.
fun character because she's this kind of like eccentric neighbor who is, I don't know. I really like that character.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So she's been in tons of stuff. She also was well known in the 90s and unfortunately lampooned a lot for her, infomercials that she used to do for various child hunger charities. So I don't know. So she's had an interesting career. She was recently on Mark Maron's podcast, the What the Fuck podcast, where she kind of talks about this like kind of strange part of her career. So I don't know, maybe that's worth a listen, but she's definitely kind of a legend. And, it's nice to see that later in life, she kind of had like a second act being in the Gilmore Girls, and then she was in the reboot, of course. So, yeah.
And speaking of legends, I'll give a brief shout out to Mr. Norman Lear, the creator of the original story world that resulted in Gloria, even though he wasn't a part of this show. And maybe if he was, it would have been more successful. But Norman Lear is about to turn 100 years old.
Wow.
On July 27th, which is a few days from now. But by the time this episode comes out, it will have probably already happened. So there you go. Happy birthday, Norman Lear.
All right. Like, I feel like I've said about as much about Gloria as I think I can do. As much as I can't lie, that's about as much all in the family talk I can handle for one day.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Me too.
I mean, I sort of wonder what Mr. Producer might have to say about it.
Well, I think he's still on his book tour.
Give him a try.
All right.
Hello. Anthony produces phone. This is Jody. He's not available at the moment, but...
Who is it?
Tony, you can't do that. You're lying low.
Jody, who is it?
Jody, tell him it's Aaron Yeager with That Was a Show.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Yeger. I'm afraid now might not be the best time.
Is that Aaron? Give him to me. Hey, kid.
Hi, Mr. Producer. How's the tour going?
Fine.
Things sound a bit tense.
No, it's fine. What are we talking about today?
I'm not going to jail, not for you and not for this job.
It's fine, Jody.
What's going on over there?
Jody's a little tense because our luggage is being held for suspicion. But it's fine. I got a guy in customs, Jody.
Whoa, what? Maybe we shouldn't be talking.
No, screw that. This idiot is finally getting interesting.
You know what, Helmer?
What?
Nothing. Like your life.
So what'd you get caught with? A little grass, maybe some uppies? You got some super uppies?
Of course not.
So what do you have in there?
It's nothing. I had a friend show up at one of the signings. He came in from Budapest. Pest. He brought me back a nice little shipment of the sweetest greens you've ever seen. Some rare Hungarian horntail, some sweet Debrecen gherkin. The good stuff.
Oh, for fuck's sake, is this all about pickles?
Not just any pickles, kid. These, well...
Goodbye, Mr. Producer.
Makes me want pickles.
We have some in the fridge.
Well, that was interesting. He's getting a little unhinged there.
I think being out on the road, is like...
It's stressful.
Yeah.
Guy's a deadbeat.
On that note...
I might have a couple of brief leftovers here.
All right,
Do either of you
Aaron.
have any leftovers?
No, I'm good.
Fuck no.
Okay, well then I'll try to be as brief as possible.
Oh, one. I feel like we somehow went the entire show talking about All in the Family and the spin-offs of All in the Family without once mentioning that obviously there was one very successful All in the Family spin-off, The Jeffersons.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, there were 2 very successful All in the Family spin-offs.
What was the other one?
Maude.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And
there's
then
like
there's Maude.
7. There's
then
like
there's Maude.
And then there's Maude.
There's 7 altogether, I think. It's wild.
Oh, God.
I don't even feel like listing them all. But
No,
there's-
don't
But
bother.
the
It's all,
Jefferson was hugely one of the biggest.
yeah, almost as big as All in the Family, I would
Yeah.
say.
You're killing us,
no.
Yeager.
You guys really need to see this. I mean, Yeager's got a big legal pad and he's flipping through it like he's really ready to nail the guy on the stand, like he's got something for us.
You know what? As it turns out, I don't actually have any real leftovers other than, I guess, just to say, like, I do think a version of this show could have worked. And I went into recording this episode thinking that I was just going to be like outright panning this thing. But like really, especially after watching the original pilot
Yeah.
and seeing what the character could have been, I really do think they could have made a show about the Gloria character that worked. And there are little essences of what that could have been amongst the original pilot and episode 21. And it's too bad that it didn't.
Yeah,
Yep,
I agree.
Yep, for sure.
But this is compared to other shows that we've reviewed, where there's either been shows where I'm like, I like this show and it was like canceled before its time, or this show should have been given a chance, like it was great, or shows where it's just like, oh, this is terrible and glad this was canceled. This is actually like neither of those 2 categories.
Interesting. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we have concluded that it was a show.
Yes.
Yes. Could have been, should have been, but still was. No.
And on that note, That Was a Show is created and hosted by Brynn Byrne, Andrew Barry Helmer, and myself, Aaron Yeager. It's a production of Radio Gizmo in Toronto, Canada. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. Follow us on Instagram and tell your friends about it. That Was a Show?
Radio Gizmo.